everybody. Welcome to First Friday, which is on First Thursday, which is there because it's Maundy Thursday, it's Easter week, and we pray that everyone's preparations are going well for Easter and these next few days. So thank you for joining us, both for those that are with us now and for those watching the recording afterwards. Today is one of those well, we know in all cases with Christian life, the answer is always Jesus. And what does Jesus say on a sort of topic like this? Well, he says, to love your neighbour as yourself, and to love yourself with this is something which actually requires some conscious awareness, I think. And what Hannah and I will be having a look through today is both from, I think, professional and technical, and from psychological and physiological. And all of those things intersect, as we'll look at. But I think as people that are involved with communications and the people watching this live and those people catching up after us, we're all quite different, but nevertheless, we're all caught up with a cycle of various things to consider personally and professionally. And I think if the aim of today is to help us all be aware of some of those things, and I'm hoping that you'd be able to pick out some things from today, even if it's one of the books that we recommend, we'll be able to go, okay, that's something that perhaps I need to have a look at. And it's a caveat that Hannah and I both said yesterday. It's not to say that we are at the sort of the promised land of this and we're all sorted. We're absolutely not. A lot of what we're sharing today is about reminding ourselves what we need to do as well. So that's my introduction. Hannah, over to you.
I mean, I feel like I don't need to say this because hopefully you do know who we are. So if you're new to the First Fridays, it's our monthly gatherings, and you can find more details on the BU website. So the first half hour, we will just sort of, Mike and I will go through these suggestions and recommendations and sort of reflections, and then we'll have a conversation for the second half that won't be recorded, so that will be open to everyone who is in the Zoom here. But please do, if you have any comments or questions or disagreements or anything that you sort of want to respond to with what we're saying, please do put it in the chat, and we will, other people can respond to it, but equally we'll go back in through it in the conversations. And the slides and anything else, we haven't got any other handouts to give out with this session, will be emailed afterwards. So we will be looking at internet safety, well-being and awareness, kind of covering a number of different aspects. The first side of it, we want to look at sort of comms teams and individuals. So actually, what are we doing as either the teams, or if you're working on sort of with a ministry team, or if you're working on your own. So just some things to think about how we personally and practically use internet and technology. So the first thing to kind of from a safety point, I suppose it is, we're not going to talk on safeguarding as such, because that's for another First Friday towards the end of the year, but sort of actually on technical sort of safeguarding and safety, passwords, storage and accessibility. So the first thing of actually devices, what is the security on your devices? How difficult is it for people to access them? Whether that is with passwords, I'm going to be honest, I'm an Apple user, so I can do Face ID with my devices. So actually it is harder for people to get in. And then I have sort of next level security for various other apps or resources within my phones. So I'm not sure if like other devices do that as well, but actually, is it easy for people to get into your devices? And as well as a sort of comms person, if I'm out and about doing, so I've recently done a Southwest Ministry retreat that I was sort of there to film and record for. And I'm very aware that I can't and shouldn't leave my phone lying around when there's lots of, well, those sorts of events. I feel it's quite safe, but I'm aware of not just leaving my phone lying around, that anyone can access it, or that it's open and people can sort of get hold of sort of, not that I hold a lot of safe information, but sort of just actually that people can't get onto Twitter accounts and hijack them, or things like that. So just actually, what are your safety precautions with your devices? If you have a computer in your church office, how easy is it for people to get into? You know, there's not that the password is sort of up on the pin board right next to it. And then actually thinking about then sort of storage of those devices. Is everything stored on just one device, just on your computer, or actually is it on cloud storage? So this is more important if you've got a lot of data or safeguarding information, that actually it's not all just on one device, one computer that could be damaged, or I don't know, something happens to it and it's sort of suddenly you can't access all of the private data and sort of information that actually really needs to be kept safe. So how are you storing? I feel like I've said clouds and storage loads of times now. Are you storing it on sort of a cloud where it is easier for people to access, who need to have access, without it being just on the one device? And there are so many resources now, you know, Church Suite or other MailChimp and places like that, of where you're holding data that is really dangerous. Well, that does hold potential risks if it's just on the device, but actually they have good precautions of preventing any issues with stealing data and information, if that makes sense. And one of the things I think I've really learned from the pandemic is that just not just one person has access in case of an emergency. So obviously we're praying that like nothing like the pandemic ever happens again, but actually if your access to not just those important data, safeguarding access, but just in terms of like the church Facebook page or YouTube account, is that just in one person's accessibility? So I always recommend to people I work with that it is good to have a handful of people, I'd say like no more than 5, who have access to those platforms. Not to say they have responsibility or a right to post, or, you know, but it is just that if something should happen, that actually they can, the church as a group can access those platforms. And so I've had issues before of someone was ill and we couldn't get into an account, and so it was a bit of a sort of stress of trying to kind of like change passwords or change emails, or who had access to that. And I've also had experience where something like MailChimp, actually they've got a really good high threshold of trying to access the account. So I try to sign in, and one of my work colleagues, whose email it is, he has to give me the password to get in. So actually it's quite good. So again, if something happens with him, that's a bit of a problem, but it's just that we've got those levels and procedures just to make sure that everyone's data is safe, but also that there's precautions in place if someone is ill. And one of the things now that's going sort of becoming more common with accessibility is two-factor authentication, which is really good to ensure that your systems have that. However, Mike has quite a good observation of something that happened recently on making sure how we ensure that it's done safely.
Well, yeah, it's one of those. One story which was shared quite widely on the BBC was where a criminal was at work in a gym working with people's phones and had got a piece of technology and was getting access to people's bank accounts, but needed to have a passcode to be able to get access into the bank account. Now, with a lot of apps you get, whenever you log in, it will say, I will send you a text to receive that passcode. Now, most people's notifications on their phone will just appear on their phone, so that whether or not you've got access to it or access to the phone or not, you would be able to see a text message appear. So this person went to town getting access. The first part of the criminality, I can't remember how they did it, but the second part was that that person's phone they could see, and they could get the passcode, which meant they had access into their account, and they took funds from their account. And it was a change in procedure for us at specialist teams. So yeah, we as specialist teams, there was several attempts over the past recent years to try and hack our systems from various sources. And so certainly it's policy on our work devices and work phones that yes, notifications for text messages are turned off so that they don't flash on screen, that you have got to be in the device through your first level of security to do that. So it's just a little thing which, yeah, I haven't thought of before, but now I do.
Mm-hmm. So do you want to carry on with this section now, Mike, of actually how to physically react to it?
Well, that's it. I mean, in fact, Hannah, would you like to just read out that little bit of research that you found? I thought that was quite interesting on the World Health Organization.
Yeah. So quoting from this article that I read, of the WHO highlighted that increased screen time replaces healthy behaviors and habits like physical activity and sleep routine, and leads to potentially harmful effects such as reduced sleep or day-night reversal, headaches, neck pains, digital eye syndrome, cardiovascular risks such as obesity, high blood pressure, and insulin resistance due to increase in sedentary time amongst adults. Evidently, increased screen time has alarmingly caused collateral damage to optical health, eating habits, and sleep routines. And studies have found association between excessive screen time and poor mental health among adults. So it's very encouraging for someone who identifies as a digital missioner.
Well, that's it, and I think it's one of those quotes that might sort of terrify you, but it's one of those things I think from today is to sort of take the physical side of things sort of quite seriously. We'll sort of move on to how this will affect us spiritually and sort of psychologically, but certainly as we've got starting as it says on the screen there with our sort of eyes and bodies and brains. If you're only looking at something that's at a very fixed focal length for a fixed length of time, we know people's eyesight gets worse because of screen time, and it's giving your eyes a rest, making sure that I try and practice what I preach is. So I've got a fairly nice outlook. I've got some trees to look out from, but I often will make sure that I'm looking at different things whenever I know I'm going to be at the screen for a significant length of time. Making sure, that's it. You get up, you do go and make yourself a drink and a tea, and just give yourself time just to reset. I think as part of having regular breaks is sort of really important. Now, a big thing for me, as some of you may have spotted, is that I'm always at a standing desk, and I know it culturally it's still not really caught on actually, and most people will sort of snigger in the corner when there's somebody at a standing desk and think they're trying to be sort of a cool hipster in some sort of way. But for me, it got born out of I was already interested in sort of looking after my back and physical side of things, but certainly when we had the first lockdown, I was slumped over the desk because I was part of the specialist teams trying to sort out all this guidance going out. So we worked really long days during that first lockdown, and a long-term lower back issue with a disc came back to me, and I was in agony for 3 weeks, and I knew it was down to being slumped over the desk. And so as a result of that, once I could stand up properly and walk again, I moved to having a standing desk. And it's not an expensive setup, it's on a really cheap table, and then about a £50 desk that I can put both screens and keyboards and put stuff and arrange stuff at the right height and all of that sort of thing. And my back has been improved massively in that time. And what had become a fairly regular 2, 3, 4 times a year thing hasn't happened since with that. In a moment, we'll have an interesting picture come up actually in terms of positioning, using if you are, you've definitely got to sit at a desk, but I've got an interesting image for you coming up in a moment. But there's a mantra for a book which we'll share at the end, which is called Desk Bound, Standing Up to a Sitting Down World. And their mantra is, but your best position is your next position. And that's physically being aware of how you were sitting, that the position you're in, and always consciously thinking, right, okay, then how am I going to actually just physically change that position going forward? And there's a sort of good ways in which you can make sure that you do that right. Yeah, as it goes on there, sort of windows and light, making sure that you aren't having excessive strain through the working day. How is your notifications? We've talked about sort of security of notifications, but what's the state of your notifications at the moment, both in terms of your sort of laptop or your sort of main device, along with your phone in particular? Now, I used to be a notifications on everything, and those little red dots I know were always driving me crazy. So I've switched everything off, actually. So I have no notifications on any app or anything at all. I'm in a good rhythm, certainly when I know I'm in the working day, to be checking everything at a frequency which sort of works for me. And I think, again, another good thing to go away from today is saying, do I need all those pings, those little buzzers going off all of the time for everything? And you can go through all of those apps and go, okay, give it a try over Easter, to see how you get on with it. And then, yeah, finally, just on that final bit, the blue light, I think a lot of people are a bit more aware of that now, but particularly as you go through into the second half of the day and into the evening is how much exposure to blue light you're getting. So by default, all devices have a light frequency which makes our brain think it's the middle of the day. And certainly as you then come into the evening when you should be producing melatonin, which prepares us for sleep, the melatonin production doesn't happen because of the blue light interference with that, meaning that when you come to sleep, it's actually far harder to go off. So making sure that you're reducing the amount of time that you've got on your screens, but also using apps and making sure you're going to night zone, which puts a sepia effect and reduces that blue light frequency. And I've done that for a long time because I was having trouble with my sleep as well. And it is one bit that helps with that. So going on to our slightly comical picture here, which I know some of you will chuckle at this because we had a laugh about it before, but this is from the Desk Bound book. But this is this whole sort of example of the your next position is your best position. If you are sat, the different ways in which you can sit on there, and some of those, as Hannah showed me earlier, if you're on a swivel chair, are perhaps a little bit more dangerous on there. So certainly on if you can lock your wheels down, if you're on a swivel, there are several on there which work, because when I was more on a chair, I did practice some of those with that. But Desk Bound, Standing Up to a Sitting Down World, is a great book to dip into, and funnily enough, it's with a friend of mine, somebody from the specialist teams at the moment who's got it, and before he gave that, I sent a screenshot to somebody else. It's a great book just to dip into. So thank you for that, Hannah. I think I'm back over to you now.
Well, I was just thinking, did you want to share that horror story you shared with me about that younger person who was sitting funny?
Oh, well, I mean, that's it. Sometimes it's just being aware of how you stand up, actually. Because funny enough, just for me personally, back to my back issue, my back's gone when I've stood up from the computer before. So there are certainly Desk Bound goes to ways in which you can sit up and stand up properly. But somebody who I used to know, stood up from their desk straight away, and somebody called them over and swiveled round, and their body went one way and their knee didn't, and they really badly dislocated their knee. So they needed a whole leg cast to help reset it and get themselves doing. So again, I'm not trying to terrify you, but it's being aware of how you sit, getting up, sitting down. Certainly if you're at the desk for a long time, of being aware of those things.
Yeah. I am not confident at doing 8. I mean, I can try for like 2 seconds, but I am not confident at working perpetually at my desk in position 8. So I'm going to have to see what works best for me. So if we're aware and sort of working through the kind of physical side of how we're working, one thing that's really important for me is like how we're emotionally and spiritually treating our online usage. And again, as a digital person, as a digital native, I am very aware of my sort of blurred lines between work and sort of leisure hobby time, and how I communicate sort of professionally in work, but also with my friends and family. And so I'm very aware of for my soul and my mental health and well-being, am I keeping my touch light with how I use online? So where in work it is about sort of like proving ROI and like, is this post going to do well, because it's about reach and promoting this and that. But actually, when I'm posting personally, obviously it'd be lovely to have kind of good numbers and likes and shares and stuff, but actually I need to be aware that it doesn't matter. I've shared a lovely sunrise or something, but my value to society and the world is not in how many likes that my posts get, and so I'm really trying to kind of learn with how I'm using personally social media and digital, that I'm not kind of getting wound up in thinking like that, but actually also of thinking about how that professionally is done, because I don't think that's healthy for us as churches and then as individuals, if that's sort of where we're always directed. And and so actually sort of how do we go from sort of one to the other? I think this was some research that you found, Mike, of attention span, that when you were explaining it to me, of that before digital and sort of social media and everything, people used to have very good attention spans, and they people could read books for a long sort of intensive periods, whereas now, because we are so used to, and I admit that in a time of TikTok and short videos and tweets and sort of swipe and scroll and sort of very quick response to everything, that our attention spans are so much shorter now, and that people find it so much harder to read normal books, not just sort of online posts and stuff like that, but actually that we are now so it's not even bored, we just can't focus, and I think that's something really to be aware of. So I'm trying again, to be honest, most of this stuff is it's just a reminder for me. I'm trying now to spend more focused time in reading or doing something without needing to go, right, I need to look at my phone. I'm not looking at it for anything specific, I'm just like distracted, or my attention has gone on whatever it was I was doing, I'm going to check my phone. And actually it's really interesting when you sort of are aware of it and sort of going, actually, where is my attention? And I'm not sort of suddenly feeling, I need to check Facebook or Twitter or whatever. And then, as I said already, so that balance between regulated, so I know what I have to do in my work time, I'm checking emails, and I'm checking social media for certain things, or I'm posting for certain things. It's quite more intentional and structured in what I'm doing. But then my unregulated time, so my leisure time, that I could end up just being an hour on TikTok, and suddenly I don't know where the time's gone, and I've not really taken anything of value in with that. And it's sort of knowing of how we're treating that. And one thing as a creator in that I'm trying hard to do with my sort of unregulated time is making sure that I'm creating more than I'm consuming, because again, our habits with online is better, not habits. Research shows that actually it is, we are more likely to have mental health challenges or sort of problems if we are just mindless consuming of content. So actually, if we're creating, that's of something of sort of value, but actually it's something intentional and creative, and that sort of is a bit better than just sitting and scrolling endlessly. One of the things I'm trying really hard to do, and Mike already said of sort of over Easter, is to have more intentional Sabbath time. So actually making sure that what I'm doing is not sort of just, it's the weekend, I'm going to fill it with doing errands and life stuff, but actually am I spending it as designated Sabbath time, trying to spend it with God and my family, and actually it being sort of life-giving and sort of intentional. But on those days, I'm also trying really hard for them to be, as much as possible, screen-free days. But I will have my phone on me, and if I have to message someone, it will be like on WhatsApp. But I am not very sociable actually on those days, and I intentionally do not spend any time on sort of social media. And that I'm not always good at doing it, because sometimes with work it's hard to have it as sort of set days. But I'm trying really hard to, and actually I find them really it feels very sort of tense throughout the day, because I'm desperately wanting to see what's happening on Instagram. But actually at the end of the day you go, gosh, life happened without me needing to go on and tweet 20 times and stuff like that. So they are good, you know, I mean, we should all be doing Sabbath anyway, but actually just having that where we're not feeling guilty for not being online, especially as communicators, as individuals, where it is our job to do that. And again, as Mike said, are your notification, do they need to be on all the time? And I've done the same of, I think my notifications only come up if I have a phone call or a bank notification, because I do like kind of just seeing that to make sure my bank safety is all okay. But I do not have texts or social media pings or emails and everything. Actually, it's hard to see, but they don't pop up, but it is only sort of WhatsApp or Messenger that I have the little red number. That's probably not going to come up. The little red number come up. I don't have on my email icon. You know, you have several thousand unread emails for all of my accounts. So actually, and I found since having done that, that has significantly reduced the pressure that I feel when I look at my phone of going, oh my gosh, I have so many things I need to deal with. So for me, actually turning my notifications off, I have to then be intentional and remember to look at the various places where people might message me. But I do find that actually, for me, that is so much better. So yeah, I sort of aware of how we treat and how aware of how we're responding to how we engage both sort of professionally with online, but also socially online. Yes. And as my dog just snorted, like it is important. And then sort of thinking about how do people reach you? So it's sort of notifications and stuff is sort of how our relationship with our devices are, but actually how are our relationships with people beyond that? So who can get in contact with you? So again, if you're a day off, people shouldn't be able to get hold of you, especially if you're sort of actually a church leader and you know, you are pulled in 101 directions. It is important that those sort of boundaries and limitations, just because, you know, your house is there or because you have a telephone, people shouldn't be calling you then. And one thing that I've kind of not sure quite how to deal with this necessarily is I do sometimes get friend requests from people who say have come to a webinar, and you know, I've been like, yes, like come follow me on Twitter or Instagram or something, because that is a very sort of more open space. But I get then a lot of friend requests on Facebook, and I'm very aware of like, actually, I don't really know you, and maybe we don't have any friends in common, or, you know, actually I share a lot more personal things on Facebook. So I am more guarded about who I am friends with on Facebook in particular, whereas Twitter or Instagram, you know, come follow me, come say hi, because that is how I am treating that platform of being a lot more open. Again, if you're a church leader or a church, you know, exclusively or just in sort of administration within the church, you don't have to be friends with everyone, because actually suddenly then the boundaries are blurred of they can come to you and complain about everything, where actually that shouldn't be done in Facebook Messenger. That should be done sort of through email, so it can be managed and, you know, it's safeguarded if there's concerns for that. And as well on sort of, yeah, then pastoral responsibilities. If everyone is friends with you on Facebook, and actually maybe there is a very difficult situation that shouldn't be managed over Messenger or WhatsApp necessarily, just because people can access you through that way, and setting those boundaries, whether that is verbally said or on your church website or something like that, that actually setting that sort of precedent is really important, so that people know, well, okay, that is how it is. It's not a sort of a suddenly they've changed how they're doing it and I can't get hold of them and I found this very rude. So yeah, it is really important to kind of like know how people can access you, and that they know how they should access you to have the right and appropriate and safe responses. Did you want to add anything to that, Mike?
No, I think that is really important actually, and I've had that process now, particularly on Facebook. I look at my privacy settings, and I've probably got about 80 to 100 people who've contacted me, but I don't know them. So there is those personal boundaries in terms of who I accept and which channels are right, and I think it's very good to think about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as our national comms lead, this is one for you.
So part of one of the things that we've seen recently, both very publicly, and there's a couple of examples we'll mention in a moment, but we've seen it for ourselves as well, is that there is an increasingly blurred reality between personal and professional, or where you are posting personally, but it impacts your professional standing, or people by default go, well, you are representing. We've had a long-standing conversation, and I suppose it's a bit of a challenge and a wrestle. Certainly, how we work in the specialist teams at the Baptist Union is the extent to which we can comment personally on anything, because at any time you are always carrying the fact that you've got a particular role, and that extends to people who are in regional positions, but also at local level as well. If you are known to be a certain person, then you put something out there, people will make that association with your professional standing, and it's something that has become increasingly an area of concern, and something which one of my pieces of work over the summer is working with one of our new paralegals to look at our social media policies, both internally and external guidance for churches, in terms of how we manage this personal and professional aspects, and how we, again, it's back to safeguarding ourselves and other people and your organization without it getting to the point where you can't do anything. And that's it. There will be certainly organizations now where no doubt it's part of your contract of employment that you cannot have any form of personal social media because of that. And we don't want to be draconian, but we end up having to be quite, we have to think carefully about it. Two good recent examples was clearly in wider society was Gary Lineker's personal opinion on the government, and that being linked to him being on Match of the Day and the BBC, and that clearly it was out of all proportion personally, but the fact that it was headline news for a week goes to show a personal opinion on social media then got all those headlines, the government, the Prime Minister involved. Wow, that was a difficult thing. Within church life, some people may be aware of that Aaron Edwards, he was a Methodist lecturer at Cliff College. He made some personal comments on a controversial area of Christian life, and as a result, at the end of it, he has lost his job because of that. But it was a personal opinion on his personal channel, but nevertheless, he has lost his job because of that. And it is something that, like I say, we are working on. We will give something out more formally at some point in the year, but start to think about that now, because what you do put out personally does affect. There is a direct link with our life as professionals, as Christians, as ministers, whatever role that we're in. That multi-account management one, I can't remember what that one was, Hannah.
So again, it's just a good reminder for me. For someone who runs sort of or has access to several accounts. So again, I'm thinking, I am aware when I'm posting personal stuff as to making sure actually I'm posting it on the right accounts. I'm aware that I need to think about this. Who am I representing, or who am I connected with? So I would like to think I'm not controversial, or at least too controversial, but maybe on my personal accounts, I might say something a little bit more out there slightly, but it's a continual terror if I'm having to tweet something or post something quickly, that I am not posting it to the wrong account. So I am not sort of posting something about the Southwest with East Midlands, or sort of something with the national teams is going to from my personal account or something like that. So just sort of, take a second if you're posting sort of in a bit of a rush, just to make sure it's going to and or from the right account, because that's the sort of my panic that I thankfully all of my work is church related stuff, so I'm not sort of selling a car through the BU accounts or something like that, but it is a kind of it is a bit of a panic every now and then. And then we'll go through this quickly because I am aware of time, that again, of how do we share sort of stuff like this, or from more of the kind of the safety and on that kind of more emotional and spiritual side of usage? How do we share that with the church family? I think it's really important to remember that, you know, if you're a local church or sort of national or regional associational comms person, that is not necessarily your responsibility within church comms to sort of monitor or sort of be responsible for your church family and sort of how their usage is. But I think it is really important that we are aware and that we share things where appropriate with our church family, because actually likelihood a lot of the stuff that we take in might be helpful to those people. And I think one of the big things for a lot of people, and not just for those who have sort of older congregations, because scammers are getting smarter and smarter, and so many people, I saw one once, a tweet thread from some lady who was sort of my age and said, I should know better, but I've had kind of several thousands of pounds taken from my account because this looked seriously legitimate. And yeah, it's not our responsibility to kind of like do training and things like that, but actually, are we aware of sort of what is out there? And are we sort of in past life of work, I did keep in contact, or sort of would get not referrals, emails and updates and stuff from local council, police about sort of latest scam awarenesses to share with our church congregation. And I think actually that was quite kind of like helpful to be able to share that out. But also then, is there an opportunity to link with businesses, or again, sort of your local council or service providers, to say, actually, we've got some people who might be interested, we've got a venue, could we do sort of like, not training, awareness sessions on sort of actually scams and how to check them, but also of actually other types of sort of digital and tech related events or gatherings. And because again, they are getting smarter and smarter, and there are so many different ways, but also kind of those random posts that come up that sort of are, I can't remember what the example was, but it was something on social media, on Facebook, and it was like, your mother's maiden name and your first pet are like what you'll be in a next life, or something like that. And loads of people were commenting and saying it. And someone else was like, you do realize those are likely the things that your bank asks you, and so you're publicly posting that, and people can find your birth dates because you have, like, you know, all the messages of people wishing you happy birthday on Facebook. Like, don't willingly put that sort of those questions of birthplaces and stuff like that online, where it's so easy then for people to find it if you're actually putting it out there. So sort of just being aware of kind of things like scams. And again, not exclusively for young people, but again, I think it's something really important that the church should be doing for our young people, and everyone, of actually, again, that sort of awareness of usage and the sort of concerns for online for young people. I mean, I'm so glad I am not kind of 15 years younger and dealing with social media and all of the pressures and sort of everything that goes along with online, of kind of filters and this perceived perfect life that we need to have. And then, you know, no wonder that we have so many young people with sort of depression and, you know, mental ill health, because they think that their life isn't as perfect as those other people. And I think it's completely contradicting sort of how our views of people, of our individuality and of God's love for us, no matter what. So I think that it's really we should be really aware and intentionally have those conversations with young people about how we use online, and as well in terms of like excessive usage and going, actually, it's really good, it's nice sunny weather, let's go outside and do something. And also the fact of that sort of all of those things are missional opportunities. Again, Mike, you've got a brilliant story of sort of something in your context.
Well, yeah, when I was in a local church ministry, one of the best things that we sort of set up was basically a technology help group. And that was very much done from a sort of a pastoral heart, really, is that we knew that there were people, particularly who are elderly, who are sort of, that's it. They saw the either things that they knew they needed to know more about, or the fact is that their doctors have stopped doing anything in terms of paper, and it's all gone online, and they haven't got an email address. So people who were quite isolated, who were perhaps widowed and their children were living overseas. They were aware that technology out there could help them, but they had no idea where to start. So we started a sort of a Monday morning technology help group. People caught the vision. We had we got grants for both we got grants for laptops and decent internet. It was also really good for volunteers. So I knew I couldn't just do that on my own. So I had a team of about 4 or 5 people. Some of those went to church, but the majority didn't. But they were there. They were younger people for whom they got a passion to help out, either in terms of software or from a technical and hardware perspective, and they were good with other people, and it meant that I could bless them then when they wanted references for jobs, because they were, most of them didn't have a job at the time as well. So I always think the Holy Spirit's involved when you can spot the blessings left, right, and centre. And people used to just come down, and it was a drop in. People would either come in saying, "Oh, my son said you've got to get with the technology," and they bought them a smartphone, and that's it, left them to it, as if they could do something with it. And so we would, we'd walk through them and just start with the very basics in terms of what they needed to do. But a really good thing, which I always remembered. A widow, when in fact in the time that we knew her, she lost her husband quite suddenly during the time. And then during those sort of difficult months afterwards, she realized how isolated she was. And she had a daughter in Australia, and she came down and she'd got herself a tablet, didn't know how to use it or work it, but we showed her how to do that and how to FaceTime. And she FaceTimed her daughter for the first time in Australia in the little vestry out the back. And I thought, well, that's what it's all about. It's and that was something that they found really touching, and loads of really good conversations that came out of that. So it's not just all technical and software and stuff like that in the church context. I think there is a really good missional opportunity. So we've got, I mean, Hannah, between us, we've sort of curated this list, didn't we, of our sort of book recommendations. So I did the first one, the 4,000 Weeks. Really, I've just finished that one, but that particularly looks at attention spans and how we use our time and being present to the moment. Really good. Recommend that one. Yours was next. The next couple were yours, weren't they?
Yeah, I realised I was so pleased I didn't have any spelling mistakes that I noticed on here. And indetractable, it should be indistractable. That's right. But The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. He's a Christian pastor in America, and he sort of it's sort of again about Sabbath and this sort of like fact that we seem to be rushing around everywhere and stuff like that, and I found it sort of that and infused with life, exploring God's gift of rest in a world of busyness. Again, really good of that kind of, actually I really need to prioritize a kind of Sabbath time and this not being really busy all the time, because that is my kind of inclination to do. And Indistractable, I've just started listening to it, but again, it is about kind of like focus and not being, one of the stories he shares is he was having some playtime with his daughter, and sort of they were doing this little sort of like fun quiz thing, and he didn't really respond to his daughter, and by the time, because he was on his phone responding to some emails, and by the time that he'd sort of like come back to focus on the situation, his daughter had wandered off, and he was really sort of upset that he'd ruined that moment. So that one, Indistractable, and Infused with Life is UK Andy. It's really cool. It's got some really good books out, and I've really enjoyed reading that one. And my other one is Essentialism. Read it a while back. It's not about faith particularly, and again, as someone who's inherently quite busy, I want to resist again this idea of niching down and focusing on things, but actually it was quite sort of a wake-up call in certain ways. I do recommend that book as well. And then Desk Bound is yours, Mike, and I've added that to my list to read.
And that's it. As I said earlier, it's a great dipping in book. It's not one I think particularly you'd go page to page unless you've got real interest in it, but it does everything in terms of yeah, even the other week when my wife was having some problems, she was getting some issues with her thumb and some sort of RSI with using a mouse more, because she's at a computer more now. But there was even sort of exercises and sort of help with that. But certainly in terms of the whole physiological ergonomic type of conversation, that's a great book.
Cool. So that is us done. We've got run grossly over time. But I think it is really important that we talk through these things, because it's really easy to forget about how we're physically dealing with sitting at desks all day. But also that's kind of like the mental aspect of it as well, because it is so easy to sort of ignore it, and it can lead to sort of quite serious and significant problems in the future. So we hope that this has been useful. Thank you for joining us today. The slides, and that we don't really have any handouts, but we will do links for the book recommendations, and I think we've had some others in the chat, so I'll make sure to include them as well. And if you have any recommendations of books that kind of align with this, of sort of mental well-being, on physical health, and sort of our responses, maybe Christians, please do let us know, because that's good for us to add to our reading lists. Yeah, thank you for joining us. We will see you at the next First Friday, which will be a Friday, not a Thursday, on Friday the 5th of May, where we'll be doing a kind of then 3-part series on social media, and the May session will be sort of social media from a very beginner's perspective. So if there's anything that you want us to cover in particular, please do let us know. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.